Welcome back to the Drummer Mindset Podcast with me, Joel Ferrier. I've got a new episode for you today I'm really excited about. I know I'm really excited about all of them, but truly I get so much out of these. I'm going to keep doing them as long as I can. And so for today, I get to sit down and talk with Emma Garau. She's a trans woman, and she's been able to face difficult challenges in discovering her identity, finding confidence, and maintaining her integrity in no small part thanks to the art of drumming. She's an artist that expresses the complex emotions and trials of life through different musical styles, namely punk and jazz, which is a really interesting combination. I highly recommend checking out her live performances with her band Watches. You definitely want to catch a live show. I talk about it a little bit in the talk, but I happened to catch someone on Instagram. Someone posted a live feed of them, and I haven't been out to see any kind of punk art music in a long time. So I just ran right over to Fleetwood's in West Asheville to go check them out, and it did not disappoint. It was very unique and engaging, and I loved it. But otherwise, in this episode, you'll learn she's very well versed and loves everything to do with art and music, and is a wealth of knowledge for artists that I had previously not been aware of. So I learned a little bit about Milford Graves and also Dave King of The Bad Plus, which is a band out of Minneapolis in New York. And they're also really worth checking out. I also learned about Emma's intention and plan to maintain her sanity and integrity on social media. Again, I'll put a link to her Instagram in the description, but she has a really good answer to the choppiness of drum videos, which I have been guilty of, just taking take after take and finally just going with something mediocre. She has a really good system to make it authentic and real and good. So worth checking out if you're into checking out drummers on Instagram. Also learned about drumming as a means to process big life events and express abstract emotion. So it's a really interesting one. I hope you stay tuned, and otherwise take care. Yeah, so you started looking at drums in elementary school?
Yeah, it's let's see. I had a 5th grade teacher that was like a jack of all trades musician.
Okay.
And had a bunch of instruments all around all the time.
Uh-huh.
And there were some that everyone was allowed to play that were just like hand percussion and like cheap guitars and things like that. And then there's like a drum set off in the corner that was like kind of off limits unless you got special permission.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
Okay, you have to know what you're doing if you play this. That's the rule. So the first time I ever played drums is because I lied and said I could play drums. And then I had been playing drums for a year. And he was like, oh, well, if you've been playing, go for it.
I love it.
And it was very obvious very quickly that that wasn't true at all. But he was really sweet about it and encouraged me to actually learn how to play.
Yeah.
So it went very quickly from that into simultaneously bands and the like concert percussion, like middle school and high school band stuff.
Okay.
That were always like super separate worlds.
Yeah.
But I lucked out with like percussion instructors, especially in middle school. Like there were 2 over my like 3 years in middle school that were both specifically percussionists, which I wasn't grateful for until much later, like in high school. And there's like a clarinet player band teacher that were like, what, drums?
Yeah.
What does that mean? I had no idea. So I lucked out super early with cool drum/classical percussion people.
Yeah. I love that you lied to get to play the drums.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of dishonesty as a general rule.
Yeah.
on this record, but it worked.
Totally. Well, and I also think that it sounds like great advice to me, but I've got a friend that is in the creative space and has been so for a long time, like in editing and stuff like that. And one of the things that they quickly learned was you, whatever they ask you to do, like you say, yeah, I can do that. And then you figure it out real quick.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that's the only way, like, whatever sort of leap it takes is the only thing that's going to make anything happen.
Right.
That it is definitely in like arts and creative stuff, but probably a lot more than I've ever had experience with.
Yeah.
Of just like, okay, at a certain point you just have to do it. Sometimes right from the beginning you just have to do it.
Right.
And there's no way around. You either do it or you don't.
Uh-huh. And what was it like for you, like first getting into performance?
Let's see. It was school functions were kind of the early ones. Like we did the like play the school talent show with your rock band and like cover the Beatles and things like that. And through a lot of that, I was actually on multiple instruments. Okay. Like I would cover, like I slowly, like as I got more into music generally and playing in bands, like, oh, I could like follow along enough on bass, or like, oh, sing this cover because you were the one who knows the lyrics. So we ended up doing that, and anytime we would get a gig out, I would be like revolving door instrumentalist, and I realized that like I just didn't get nervous on the drums, and everything else I would just be like shaking. And I like remember having a conversation with like a young friend and bandmate about like, oh, I'm miserable before these shows. Like I'm just like quaking from stage fright. And he was like, well, don't you like this? Like, what is it? What can we do to help that? And I was like, if I could only play drums, that would be better. And that has like so stayed the case. Where I was like performing in these really low pressure things that sort of gracefully moved into higher and higher like proper gigs. Like there was no big break of like, and all of a sudden it's a job, or you're getting paid for this, or it's in a huge room, or anything like that. It was very, very slow, but definitely like like that performance specifically on drum space was really comfortable really quickly. Yeah. And that's like such an instrument unique thing too. Like I don't like public speaking. I don't like any of these things. I need to be like right here behind my machine, right? Like at my little workstation. Totally. And then I'm fine.
Yeah. So. Yeah, there's definitely a protective nature to it. You know, and it does seem, you know, I don't know, it's one of those things where you feel like you can kind of hide, but everything that you're doing on it is not hiding. Like you can't hide any of it. Right. It's like doesn't lie. You know? Yeah. So how long have you been in Asheville?
Little more than 5 years.
Okay. And did you went to school here? Is that right?
Yeah, I went to UNCA. I did their jazz program. Okay. Some college educated, all fancy. And it was good. I liked their program, especially just like finding mentors was the part of it. I never really like loved the academic side of it. Sure. But I liked like there were like 2 or 3 teachers that were just really
like who?
Great and important. Oh, well, my main like drum teacher was Matthew Richmond. Okay. Who was fantastic and probably just as big in the like support you as a creative person in this kind of all-encompassing way, like as much or more than specifically technical musical drum things, which is definitely what I needed at the time. Yeah. Was this sort of like, okay, well, we can instantly relate that we're kind of these like more esoteric artsy people looking at this instrument, even though it is in this like academic thing with like sight reading and lots of like rudimentary things. I think there was early on this like, okay, well, we both kind of like the weird creative art side of it. Right. And I was just like super shy and like very in my shell, and like I could hyper focus really well and be like a good student and a good drummer and stuff. Right. but I think it was really important for me to have somebody be like, hey, like, you're okay, actually. Both like, okay, you're good at drums, actually. Like, you're work on your imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And also just be like, you're allowed to be here. Like, and that kind of like evolved through like many stages of like giving me permission to just be a drummer.
Yeah.
And know that like wherever I was on a drumming journey, it was just fine to be there. And then like I do think it was like this beautiful kind of like, definitely on his end, like an attempt to get me to like realize like drums are just like real life. You can be confident. And it's not a drum solo. It's like walking down the street or like ordering food. So I think he latched on to this kind of nervous, shy version of me that was at the forefront then.
I love that idea. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that before. Like it's just like walking down the street, or it's just like ordering food. It's just a like as a drum solo.
And it goes both ways too. Like it was like drums, they don't have to be that scary. It's just like living your life. Like you're improvising in every conversation you have and blah blah blah.
Right.
Which is necessary on one end, and then after a while, it kind of started to reverse into like you're gaining confidence on drums, and it's going to be important to apply that to the rest of your life. So it is this kind of like cyclical thing of like the life informs the drums, informs the life. So I super appreciate that. It definitely was like a fool's errand of like, how much can you do when I'm like fully closeted, unaware trans woman at the time.
So so you were in school. You were in jazz school.
I was in jazz. I came out like pretty much right after graduating jazz school.
Oh wow.
I did, because I had convinced myself, I was like, oh, I can't do that at school. Like no way I can do that at school.
Right.
Because you go like through like every version of like awkward stage of like, do I really want to show up to like a bunch of like young adults and like the baseball team?
Right.
Like in my like gen ed classes like this. So there's a long part of it that was like this sort of like, okay, well, we're trying to help this person. And there's like great people who want to help a lot, but like she's in denial.
Sure. And were those same mentors that you were finding that were that supportive of this specifically?
And so I think it was those things that like none of it really came to fruition when I was there. And then I like left, had some space, went on some tours with my band.
And which band was this at the time?
This was Forteza at the time.
Okay.
It was just a crazy busy year. I guess this was 2022 was just insane year. Graduate, go on tour, come out as trans while on tour.
Wow.
Awkward as hell.
How were your bandmates about it?
Sorry. They were cool. Definitely like my friend Tristan, who I'm still a bandmate with now. Forteza became Watches.
Can I tell you, like, I had no idea. I had no plans. What was that? Like a Monday night, I think I went. I think were y'all playing with Safety Coffin?
Yeah,
a few
their
weeks
release
ago.
Yeah.
And I think I was at either Little Jumbo or Five Walnut, and I just happened to pull up my Instagram, and someone had posted y'all playing, and it was like this art rock that I haven't listened to or caught in like so long that I just got excited and like went over and saw y'all and was just excited about the amount of energy y'all were pushing throughout.
Yeah,
it felt really raw and present.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what that project means to me too. And Forteza was the precursor to this. Like, kind of like the proto Watches, which now it's a duo. It used to be a trio. So Tristan especially was like my best friend of like 7 years about it.
Oh wow.
And just very much like, yeah, okay, like you think, like I'm not surprised. So I think he was one of those people that definitely knew. And was like, I knew it was something. Like, can't say I'm surprised.
Sure.
And he was like, okay, anyways, let's go.
How was that for you? Like as a response?
That's what I needed, I think. Because I did get a lot between like other different bandmates and just general people. There was a lot of like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. You're
Really?
so brave. Like, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Which is like cool. Because there was obviously some people being like, oh, like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, in a negative thing. But those are kind of easy to brush off
Okay.
in a way. Because you're like, okay, well, that officially makes you a jerk. Easy
Right.
enough to just, that's significantly more black and white.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who were kind of like super PC and like mushy about it.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh. Wow. Well, of course I support you
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an ally and blah, blah, blah. And just kind of all this like verbal stuff. It's like, but also I'm not going to call you back for gigs.
Oh, I see.
And it kind of was like, became this sort
these
of
were like other bandmates, or these were like people that were booking gigs?
a bit of both. And that's not as a whole too. That's some like isolated instances. But it made me very wary of this kind of like syrupy, fake, sweet way to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Which is all to say that like the best responses that I've gotten, including from my bandmate Tristan, was just like, yeah, okay.
I love it. Yeah.
Like, cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that went. We got back from that tour. The band immediately broke up for like underlying tensions too, but I don't think that helped.
Okay.
We kind of just took that winter off.
And you say the band because it was a trio.
Yeah.
And now it's essentially, like you said.
Yeah. And so we didn't know we were going to come back and do it as a duo. We were just like, is it done?
Okay,
Maybe it's done. Whatever. Okay. So we knew there were going to be some version where Tristan and I always played music together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just can't imagine that not being the case.
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of took that winter off to be like, I don't know what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to keep the name? Are we going to change the name? Are we going to do an entirely new project? Are we both going to like quit art punk and do a entirely different thing? Like, what's the deal? So we like scrounged together, like trying to play the last shows we had like contractually booked and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of went into this like depressive hibernation through that winter.
Yeah. And this is all 2022.
This is 2022.
So you had just graduated.
Just graduated.
You were on
just
tour.
Came out. Just started a bunch of the medical stuff.
Okay.
Which was just crazy. And it was very hard for me to like focus on like trying to make a band work again too.
Yeah.
Like especially like losing a bit of like marketing momentum and stuff and like name recognition and whatnot. It was like, it definitely wasn't starting from scratch, but there were elements that were significantly backpedaled.
Yeah.
And like, I really had no energy to do it.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just like working on all these sides. It's like trying to like do puberty again.
Right.
At 24.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What has recovery been like just with the medical correction that you've gone through?
I think it's kind of just a forever thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's definitely was really clear really quickly. It was another one of those things that was like, you do have to kind of dive into the deep end. Because like, how the hell do you know like what about yourself is you're like endocrinology?
Right.
Until you figure it out.
Right.
So there was this jump in, but it was so quick and so obvious. So it was like, okay, well that was the right decision. Onward.
Yeah. You just felt better in your body.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so obviously it's not like a one and done type thing. That's
right.
just like things are like drastic for a temporary period of time and then they just move on. Okay. But it was very clear very early on that it was like the right move. Most of life got way better. Just like music in particular was like a huge explosion. That was like kind of right around when I started focusing a little bit in addition to bands, like with some solo stuff. Started like working on a solo album and different kind of sort of like experimental avant-garde things. Is when I started deciding I was going to pay attention to like having a social media presence and things like that. It was just like more motivation.
Yeah.
Than I had ever had after like an initial like startup phase. It was like, oh, so that's how it's supposed to be. That makes sense. And I feel like it was just kind of like at least creatively exploded into like, oh, I was like, okay, well, I obviously like loved writing music and playing drums.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like taking the like practice weight off the bat.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh, whoa. Like I was trying to touch like the deepest parts of my soul with like abstract music.
Uh-huh.
But apparently I was like wearing like chainmail or something.
Uh-huh.
So like I think it was just like, oh, wait, okay, now I have like so much better access to my like creative emotions.
Yeah. I've been reading a lot about kind of and learning a lot about the muses lately, and this is something I talk about on this podcast quite a bit, just because I think it's a way to kind of, for some of us, to get out of our own way, to think about it as like either serving God or serving, something that's bigger than oneself. But also there are some other concepts where, music or art in general is a means to maybe lose the ego and find oneself. Mm-hmm. And also that I think there was something about the muses that will kind of come to this space if the individual is being honest and open about who they are.
Right.
So like, and that matches up with what your experience has been, it sounds like.
Yeah, like very much so. And it's like, I feel like I can never settle on the outlook I want to have on it. Like, cause you can see it in this sort of like esoteric way or a super like neurological way or psychological or metaphysical, or like you can look at it but it kind of all means the same thing.
Totally.
In a way, like some of me, like part of my brain always wants to like overanalyze like why. Yeah. And then I do have to sometimes tell myself like, okay, just like enjoy the win. Uh-huh. Enjoy that worked.
Totally.
You don't have to question it.
Right. Yeah. That's my work for sure. Yeah. Is like not overthinking and not over conceptualizing.
And it's hard to do. Like it's definitely, I do have this like very present like left brain of like, why though? Right. Why exactly? Can you put it on a spreadsheet why this is the way it is?
Sure.
And you really can't with any of this stuff.
Yeah, and then neurologically too, I can just trip out on it because there's another small study that came out, and I'm going to link to it. But there's a small study that came out about the relationship between the left and right brains for drummers specifically. Have you seen that study or heard about it?
Yeah, I don't know it well.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting study. They did functional MRI and everything, and they essentially took, like I said, small. So they had, I think, around like, was it about 20 controls, which were non-drummers, like couldn't play at all, and then 20 like pro drummers, and I mean avid pro drummers that were practicing at least 2 to 3 hours a day and gigging a couple of times a week, and had been doing it for like 8 to 12 years on average. So these were like folks that were true to form drummers, right? And what they found was that the connection in the frontal cortex had much stronger fibers between the two hemispheres. There were fewer of them, but it was more like kind of a highway, Cool. So I think about it in so that's the study, and that's interesting. And they also found you can learn, those folks can learn new drumming skills much faster. They can also learn spatial reasoning faster and these kinds of things, but that's pretty much where it ends. And so beyond that, I just conjecture what else that means.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I do think like it sometimes becomes like a joke amongst like friends and family and in my own head that I'm like the most like organized, like avant-garde punk rock anarchist weird combo of like, oh yeah, like always like these like super contrarian punk things and then also this like really, really abstract kind of like Milford Graves space that I love. And then also like my bandmates always give me a hard time because I'll like freak out over being like 2 minutes late to a gig. And I'll just, or like I'm like the spreadsheets and the accounting and the, like everything in all these bands.
Has the organization always been there for you?
Yeah, basic. It's kind of just always been a thing.
And is that true for like your practice as well? Are you pretty organized with your practice?
I've gone in phases of being less and more organized, which really in my brain kind of is like practicing and not.
Mm-hmm.
That's been something that's like a more recent thing to work on, or that I've been working on, is kind of like merging practicing and playing in a different way. Especially like rediscovering practicing without like a current teacher.
Okay. Because you've had a teacher for a long period of time.
Yeah,
now.
I started out very self-taught.
Okay.
Then had like middle school band teachers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That were in like the classical percussion realm, but never drum set. So that was a separate thing.
Okay.
So I did the like punk drummer, like DIY punk band startup there.
Okay.
Then went to college and was just totally overwhelmed with.
And you said in middle school, that's what you were doing. What about concert band and stuff like that through high school?
Yeah, I was doing that as well.
Too. Okay. But drum set was still on your own.
Yeah, it was just such a separated thing. Of course, I was like, okay, well, I know how to do like a buzz roll in my punk band. But I never really like put the two together. And then it was kind of college that like I really had to catch up on a lot of the like theory stuff and reading stuff and anything like that. And so then I kind of started like feel like I like caught up with all that thing, that type of thing. And then my last year going into like a little bit after graduating, I was kind of like, oh, this is getting a little stifling. Like I should finish this because it's almost done, but I'm going to need something else. So during COVID, I started taking online lessons with Dave King from the Bad Plus, which continued for, I think, a year and a half.
That's a jazz band. Where are they from?
They're split between Minneapolis and New York. Dave's from Minneapolis, and they've had a couple member changes recently. But they're awesome. They're one of my favorite bands. Dave was one of my favorite drummers before.
Oh, wow.
And I think I was just like in like early, like second week of COVID depression, like scrolling on my phone.
Gotcha.
And saw that he had posted some goofy, like, I'm doing lessons. So I like signed up. I didn't know this, but according to him, because we've run into each other or coordinated, like when either of us is in a different town, like, so we've gotten to hang out and meet and talk in person plenty. But I found out much later that I was the first and last lesson of his temporarily offering lessons.
Okay.
Where he was just like off touring and
Got it.
needed to like fill some stuff in. So apparently I was the very first and the very last.
So there were some folks in between, it sounds like.
I think he did plenty of lessons and stuff, and not too many people just did it like every week like you would like a regimented thing, because it kind of like replaced my schooling when that was all virtual.
And how did you take the virtual music lessons?
With Dave it was great. With the rest of school it was difficult. But that was like an instant connection on like every possible level of like, okay, we know the same things about this, blah blah blah, we have the same opinions about this, we know the same like obscure art reference, stuff like that. And I think it didn't take long for it to kind of get established that we were kind of on a, like, he was like had this fully developed version of an approach that already meant a lot to me, but I was kind of like intimidated and like tiptoeing into.
What kind of approach?
I mean, now I just think about this as kind of like esoteric art drumming approach. That's like it can be like super just like brutal and hard hitting and powerful and all these things, but it's kind of this like, I don't know, I'm going to like use some of Dave's words here, but he's like, it's like the Midwestern muscle on the like Cy Twombly painting or something. So we did a whole bunch of stuff. We did like everything from like Alan Dawson's books and like the Rudimental Ritual and things into like, now I'm going to hold up this picture of this painting, and I want you to play the painting, and then I'm going to critique how well you played the painting. Like it spanned this whole, like, the technical is the abstract is the technical.
Wow.
Cool world to be in.
Now, is his band pretty abstract?
Yeah, yeah, they're super difficult to explain, and they've had a lot of different versions, but they're this kind of like modern jazz, like rooted in some indie rock stuff.
Okay, I've got to check.
Plus avant-garde.
Okay.
Like it's kind of all over the place in like the best way possible.
Okay.
But it's always been Dave and the bass player Reed, and recently they just got Ben Monder and Chris Speed.
Okay.
Which I saw that version live in Winston-Salem and here actually. I saw them at the Great Eagle.
Okay.
And it was insane. So check it out.
Yeah, I will.
Hopefully everyone else's mind is blown as much as mine is.
I love it. Yeah, I think I've kind of just flirted a little bit with, kind of liking progressive metal and other kinds of music like that, but sometimes it just gets a little bit too regimented, It's just too much counting, sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like this type of stuff, which is pretty like, it has like a lot of the same elements of a lot of stuff that I'm really interested in doing. It just has a lot of these elements from all these places. Like there are like odd meters and like weird places where a melody or a rhythm will loop.
Sure.
Like it has all these elements that I like from a lot of different other places, and just puts them in this like crazy new version of a jazz palette. Texturally, which is really like where my soft spot for jazz is in this sort of like just the timbre of it is different, and you can kind of do anything within that. And I'm like, I know, like there's just some sort of the way the sound is that I kind of want to ground everything I do to, even when it is like punk.
Yeah.
And that comes out in like some goofy ways sometimes. But it is like, in my brain, that is like, that's the sound to chase, is a sort of like open elven-y sort of thing.
Okay.
So I love when bands kind of like use that in not straight ahead jazz.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes it just feels like it's a funny bit sometimes. Like it was with watches too. Like I'm playing like an 18-inch kick, full like bop sizes, and the toms are totally tuned to like pitches. So I'm sorry to everyone who like expects to backline my drum set, because the high and low tom are really like bee boo. And someone's trying to play like a punk, like a D beat on the floor tom or something.
Right.
But it's just like a palette that I fell in love with. And it matters to me a lot to bring that sort of texture to other things. Yeah.
And did that, did the recognition of that like come up for you when you were in school, like jazz school, or did you have that kind of aesthetic before?
Yeah, I think it was definitely in my head through jazz school. That's kind of really where it came out. Although I really wasn't confident enough to like say that was a thing, or even that I was someone who like had any sort of like technical skill that gave me any sort of like credibility to have a take on something. Like it was just this very like low confidence era. And then I think maybe a lot of like the technical skill like snuck up on myself.
What do you mean?
In that like I cared a lot and I practiced a lot, and I I kind of like don't remember a lot of the technical stuff building up.
Right.
I just know I was like an insecure kid into like an insecure young adult.
Yeah.
That I could just kind of zen out and play drums.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that was like going through like play like metronome on a pad rudiment exercises and stuff.
Right.
But a lot of that in that era of my life was just like meditative or therapeutic or something. And so then I feel like it's like by the time I was like creatively alert, I was like, oh, wait, okay. Like I still get that. I still get that with like if I'm like scrolling on Instagram and I see something a bit, oh my gosh, how did that drummer do that? That's insane. How do you do that? And then in my head I'll be like, oh, it's a 7-stroke roll. I've done those a million times. Like I forget that I'm not a technically terrible drummer sometimes. And I don't even like want to say like I'm a technically amazing drummer, but I think I missed the part where I realized that I could do the things.
Right.
But I was the like 5 to 7 hour a day like obsessive practicer. So like thankfully it did something. Right. But I don't think I was really paying that much attention.
Yeah. I think some of the advice that I've heard from other like professional drummers and stuff that, you know, talk about practice and everything. Like one in particular was like, you know, you shouldn't be looking at the clock when you're practicing. Mm-hmm. It should be fun, you know? And I don't know if I fully buy into that. I think for some folks, like if they really want something, they can get organized with something and say, no, I want to do this amount, I want to practice these specific things for this amount of time, make sure I'm getting it in. I think there's some value to that. But at the same time, I do think it's important to remember that practice can be fun and it should be fun. Yeah. Like maybe you're not always like grinding away at the thing that seems elusive to you. But at the same time, like if you're just playing and you're focused and you're meditating and then all of a sudden you realize it's 7 hours later, like, yeah,
I've definitely like, I think I just, for some reason came very naturally for me to tap into the meditativeness of playing, practicing, whatever it is. Like I've always been able to do that. Like I could just have a pair of sticks and like play on my thigh for hours.
Do you fidget as well? Like will you just tap like with just your hands and things like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to figure things out or just going over
so I do that a ton. But I feel like maybe that was the thing I've kind of like banked on for a while, is I do have that ability to just zone out into practice mode. The cool new thing is that that's like a really consciously happy space now. Whereas at like other life stages that has been sort of like lose consciousness. Like it was a distraction too. And I wasn't like aware of the actual like musical happiness. Cause it was just like, I've got a lot going on that I don't want to address or that I'm going through or that's stressful or that's hard or whatever. And like drums were always like a reprieve from that. Yeah. But this past year too, which I'm sure has like everything to do with like coming out and things like that. But is like, oh, I'm like very consciously happy. Like I'm aware of like minute by minute happiness playing the drums. And it's a very similar thing, but it's definitely a different thing than what it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, in some way. So we haven't talked much about this, my background. I don't know if you've looked at my website or anything or seen any of the other interviews, but I do have like a background in mental health and working in mental health. And so one of the things that I always try to say probably earlier on that would be helpful is like, this is not therapy at all. And yet I still have these questions that are so much along those lines, but
feel free to go for them.
Okay. All right. And just so you know too, like you have complete edit rights for anything that is said here and all that. So the drumming piece for you, it sounds like there's been little frustration in practice. And in fact, like that is kind of, I don't know if escape is a fair word, but you know, it sounds like it has been therapeutic for you in that way. Almost like, I don't know if addiction would be something similar. It's hard to call something addiction if it's support.
Like when it's a good thing, but there's definitely been like, especially maybe some of like the darker eras of life, because it hasn't always been exactly the same thing. It's been different versions of the same thing.
Right.
But there's a version of that for sure that had a massively like, this is a fix that I need, and I'm not going to be cool if I can't.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. A fix.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an avoidance. Do you ever feel like it was that?
I think less so now.
Okay.
But definitely, I was just like, in the best of cases, I was just like super introverted kid, and I didn't want to deal with like people at school or teachers. Like I kind of just like didn't understand how to get along with people and or didn't get along with people, and was just kind of like, everything felt super vulnerable all the time. So it was kind of escaping that, definitely. And there's something to do with the intellectual part plus the creativity part plus just the physicality of it too.
Yeah.
Was like, I mean, like for years and years, it was like a little dark corner that I made, like little like walls with sheets and shelves and stuff. In my parents' basement, that was like literally like a tiny little opening to go play drums.
Oh,
and
like
have like
bed sheets and
this
whatnot,
like enclave of drums
uh-huh.
in my parents' basement. That was like little safety zone.
Okay.
So I'm sure like at times it was like I felt like I really needed to do it in this sort of like really compulsive way.
Yeah.
There's been times where it is like a deliberate escape. There's been times when it's just habit, but that's always been like a thing. And it's always been a thing, and it always like does kind of work.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
For whatever it is. And so there's been healthy ways of looking at it and unhealthy ways of looking at it.
Sure.
But even if it's like, if it starts out like, oh, this is kind of an unhealthy, compulsive need to go play drums or to go practice or to go escape the world and do this, that process will turn around that mindset.
Yeah.
Too. So like, that's lucky. that I'm
That's
glad.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's exciting. I mean, and also it sounds to me like, if you know, the way that I'm interpreting it too is it sounds like it's integrated.
Yeah.
Did you say, do you feel it seems like it's more integrated now for you?
Yeah, now it just feels like regular being alive to play drums.
And so it's hard to really call any of that negative necessarily.
Right.
If the drums have really been kind of your therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's only really negative because like things from and out, like the outside world, outside world meaning not me and the drum set.
Right.
Like those things have been negative. And then my mindset of it was negative. And then even like, or like on a deeper level, like my mindset with myself was negative. And so as those types of things change, then like the details of the relationship between me and drums has changed, but the functional core of it is always still there. But it feels like very, very integrated with just real life now.
Yeah.
I think I've like told a lot of people in my life that ask about like the drumming and then the life change of being trans. It's like, I think the drumming was always the constant. And then like this creative self developed in this. And that has always been the true self.
It's a core.
And that's the core. Like the drumming and the music and the expression has always been exactly what it is and exactly what it needs to be. And a very honest and true thing. And I feel like transitioning has caught me up to my drumming.
Okay.
If that makes...
Yeah, I follow.
like the most abstract of sense. But I felt like I wasn't the right person for like where that core was. But having, I mean, I don't know. It could have gone any number of like likely terrible ways had I not had this drumming thing to be like, oh, it really was this kind of like looking glass to like life can be.
Right.
Everything that is encapsulated in this like beautiful expression.
Uh-huh.
And then I feel like with the process of transitioning and everything, real life has caught up to how good drums said it could have been.
Uh-huh. It's yeah, I've heard it said before, you know, people talk about their ears have to catch up with their hands, you know, drummers.
Yeah.
You know. But this is there's a little bit more to it, you know, when you're talking about kind of discovering yourself in the music, or if the music was always there in a core, and then maybe it was revealing in some way about your identity.
Yeah. I do think there's, I mean, if I was to try to like, I don't think there's a way to like phrase it that doesn't seem corny, but like if I had to choose that same sort of like way to turn it, there is an element of like my conscious brain had to catch up with where my heart was.
Right.
And drumming was just a really accurate expression of where my heart was.
Uh-huh.
I think that's like the best way I can kind of explain it, is like the drumming was just accurate. It's just how it is.
And is this all in retrospect?
Yeah, this is super all in retrospect.
There was no, again, kind of like you were saying before, there wasn't a moment where you were like, where you had it. It was like you were practicing and you're like, oh, I'm in it. But it was like,
I think I remember, like, I mean, there's definitely some moments, but this like the intellectualizing of it is very, very retrospect. I do remember like getting off the phone with my mom, dropping just like totally like, because I was like so uncomfortable with like all conversations all the time, but I was like talking to my mom. I was like, oh, the weather's great today over at my place, like, oh, remember those tomatoes that you helped me plant, like they're going great now, like the weather's beautiful. Cool. Well, before you go real quick, I think I'm trans.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I know you have to go to work. And my mom was like, no, I don't now. Like, what's happening? And I remember, and we had a whole conversation. It was great, but I remember getting off the phone from coming out to my mom and going immediately to go play drums.
Oh, wow.
And, like, actively smiling. Like smiling and laughing and grinning. I probably looked like this like snotty, like bubbling, like, but I was just like playing, and it feels like in retrospect, I have no idea, it probably sounded terrible, but it feels like it was like one of just the purest, best I've played.
Wow.
And it felt like it was kind of this reward for doing this like functional life part of a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, and like your little drum set's right here, and like now you get to access more of it. It just felt like this really beautiful thing where like it's been something like I've tried to figure out how you musically capture that too.
Yeah.
Of like even how it sounded in my head and how I know it sounded different in the room. But like I could hear the sounds of myself crying and half laughing and drums happening. And I do like I like have to like laugh about it now and be like, Milford Graves would have loved it. Like it's this very, what's his exhibit called, like Drum Listens to Heart.
Okay.
I feel like that's I don't know if you're like a active Milford Graves.
No, I've got to again, I'm learning so much just through talking to so many different people.
Yeah.
But I'm of that, you know, fortunately in this day and age, you never really miss the bus. You're just kind of catching it at a different point, you know? Right. But, so yeah, I've got to look into that. But what I'm kind of tripping out about too is like the so this is kind of the thread I'm picking up from you, is like this integration. Because one, for the identity of who you are as a trans person, but then also the way in which you associate all this emotion, this complex emotion, and immediately also go to the drums, and then you're fully engaging your body and your timing and your more of your brain with all those emotions too, is fascinating to me as an art form, because I think a lot of times what can be lost on the drum set, I mean, I saw it, like I saw a post on one of these forums for drummers for hire.
Right.
And it was like someone posted looking for a timekeeper, I was like, that kind of stuff like really bugs me.
Right.
To see like and sometimes that's the role, that's what the music calls for. And like there can be, it has its own rewards, if you're playing that kind of music, but it also just the label of timekeeper versus artist, versus human who's like fully engaging, their emotion and their spirit into what they're doing,
Yeah. This is a little bit more of like a drum centric, less than like psychological comment, but I've always been a fan of the word pulse rather than beat or keeping time or things like that. I've always really liked the idea that like quite often like it is the same thing, like the pulse is the same thing as the beat.
Sure.
But also in some of the most interesting situations it's not.
Like when? Like with the art rock that you practice, or?
Yeah, or in any of like the avant-garde jazz or experimental music. I think it becomes really true. I've been really interested in a lot of like modular synth music. Even really if you think about it, like in like what we consider some of like the best swing feels. And like how we as drummers tend to describe like how unique like Elvin's ride cymbal pattern is, or Tony's ride cymbal pattern, or whoever's ride cymbal pattern, that's just great. And like we can always say like, oh, you could hear that just from the ride cymbal, like exactly who that was. It'd take you like 2 bars. That's like such a commonly said thing, but if you really get into why, it is this like there's something different. There's something, whether it's like zoom in microscopic or zoom entirely out or whatever this is, there's this undulating thing that is not metrically perfect.
Right.
That has more to do with breathing than it does like where a quarter note is. And you can kind of see like there's situations where like you can think of drummers that where that pulse or your breathing or the circular motion of something is very lined up with what a metronome would do.
Sure.
There's other drummers like, again, Milford Graves is like the best example of someone who's like, it's a completely different plane. Like you have to really put yourself into his head to understand what kind of a pulse is he on, because he's on a pulse. Like it's not random, but you figure out like there's these kind of waves and circles and shapes to it,
right?
That with your like classic like backbeat music, they're things they can overlap. It's kind of a rectangle square and thing. Like,
right.
Like the beat is always the pulse, but the pulse isn't always the beat.
And
it has a lot more room for like personal like undulation.
Sure.
And so I don't know, like my favorite things are like exploring the extremes of that. Like how far can you go away?
Yeah.
From our idea of like the drums keep time. That's where the quarter note is. This is what the meter is. You're doing this in 4, you're doing this in 3, 5, whatever.
Right.
How far away can you still do that? Or can you do that and still there's a pulse?
Yeah.
If you listen back to yourself, or if somebody listening to you, ideally if you even like a non-drummer or a non-musician listens, they can be like, there's some sort of traceable feel
right
through this. So I love exploring the extremes of that. I also am super passionate about trying to figure out, like, how do you do that when you are with a band and you do have to stick to this, let alone if you're playing in a band and you're playing with a click.
Yeah.
How do you still play like a drummer who knows that difference?
Have you done that much? Played with a click with a band?
Mostly in recording stuff. I haven't done much like live big stadium click things like that. But plenty in the studios, and it's always like such a crazy challenge, and it's a risk too, like of like I know I'm well practiced enough to play to a click correctly.
Right.
But it's like, okay, like maybe I need to just jump in. Like, is this the time where I get to jump into the deep end and try to be like, okay, well, I've got to balance where this click is, and then also the type of drum stuff that I'm passionate about. Like, I think that's a strange thing. It's like you'd be so metrically on, and something tiny about your playing is like, oh yeah, you're on a different level in a good way.
Right.
So I think those are my two like areas of
Absolutely.
passion, is like the extreme of this, and then the like working it back into this like pop music in the generalist of senses framework.
Yeah. Something for like that a lot of people can understand.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
opposed
yeah.
to, like,
just some sort of like it's like
yeah.
not music for musicians only.
Uh-huh.
Which really, like, I don't think anything really should be. Even like my favorite compliments I get are like not from drummers. Like my favorite compliments, even from my little like 30 to 40 second, like, this is what I played this morning. This is like some weird improv thing where I'm like touching the drums and doing crazy stuff. Like my favorite compliments are when people are like, who don't drum, who are just friends, and they're like, oh, I like don't like other people's drum videos, but something was up with that. Like, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, me too. Something was up that, and I don't know what it was.
They feel real. Like when I watch your videos, like they feel in time, like in the moment, and not chopped up or trying to show something. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that was my goal with all of that too.
It's not like Insta drummers that you typically would think of. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or how you feel about that term.
I'm anti everything that's involved with that stereotype for the most part. But that was like my goal, because I was like very anti social media.
Yeah.
And like not into it. And I kind of like told myself, I was like, okay. I was 22 at the time, and I was like, I can't be 22 and already jaded and like try to pull this like I hate technology card.
Right.
Like
there is like a Luddite movement, right? I think
right. And there's a part of me that totally puts a lot of value into that. And then I did have to be like, come on.
It's a balance.
Yeah. Right? So I did that, and I actually, in retrospect, I like how I went about it, is like I just wrote down ground rules for myself.
Okay.
Of that. And some of them were specific. Some of them, I was just like, really, like, you don't record anything for Instagram that you're not going to do that day anyways.
Okay.
Like, the point is like,
as your organized practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, these are just things that I would have played that day, whether it's a quick, I need to like let some emotion out for 5 minutes, or like, let me warm up before I like do a regimented practice, or warm down after, or I'm just gonna jam, whatever it is. It's like that needs to just be what I would have done.
Okay.
And then I think like the real specific one is like is I take no more than 3 videos at a time.
Okay.
So it's like one idea, one take, and if an idea doesn't work, you get up to you just move on to the next idea, and you get 3 shots. So if you have 3 ideas that don't work or sound right when you play them back, like, you're not posting that day.
And where did you come up with this?
I just knew that it would be pitfalls I would have fallen into if I didn't. Because I would have been like, oh my gosh, if I don't set up this hard limit for myself, I'm gonna like freak out and do like 150 takes on a 30-second idea because I'm just hyper analyzing this, and then I'm going to hyperanalyze like how my hair is in a video, or like, oh my gosh, the light changed in the window, or like I know my brain works in a way that I would fall for that if I let myself. And then that kind of combines with the idea that it's really valuable to me that it stays actual improv.
Yeah.
Because really it's like if you do 2 takes of the same thing, you're not really improvising anymore. And so, which you can do in like many contexts, and I do that in bands and when we're trying to record and different things like that. But I really wanted to set up any social media presence, having no idea if it was going to work or not.
Okay.
Or have any traction at all. I was just like, if I'm going to get any traction on here, it needs to be for doing it the way that I care about, which is this like very like natural, pure improv, quote unquote, pure improv, because what is, but I wanted to keep it as close to real improv as possible. Which is super.
Are there moments where you feel like sometimes I think of improv as like meditation, right? Like as soon as you're aware that you're meditating, you're kind of out of it.
Yeah. I definitely I think that's too why like setting a limit is good. Like if it doesn't work that day, it's not going to work that day.
Okay.
And that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to be like pretty good about getting myself into an improv headspace. I think it's just been a thing I've cared about for a long enough time that I'm like, I know what that is. I can like go through the like Rolodex of like improv on the drums.
Do each of your songs and watches have some improv component?
On my part, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So you'll have like riffs, or it's Tristan. So a lot of riffs, but also there's clear like improv that's going on. It seems like Tristan as well.
There's some where there's deliberate open sections that are just cued back in after we're done. But even the most structured bits of songs, like I think if you lined up drum parts, they would just be all over the place.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the idea of like, okay, yeah, there's not necessarily a written drum beat. There's a written drum pulse.
Okay.
And so that usually, like, in practicality, that comes out as, like, the backbeat's going to be in the same place.
Yeah.
Or it really needs that bell right there because that's part of this broader texture.
Right.
But it's much less conceptualized as patterns as it is, like, it needs to move in this way.
Yeah. I feel like my brain is stretching right now in a good way because... And I'll tell you what I'm thinking about right now is that when I first started learning to play the drums, like we the teachers that I had were all talking about feel, and it was like heartbeat plus metronomic time equals feel, right? And then a decade or so later, it was like everyone's talking about pocket, in kind of a similar fashion. But the way that you're talking about it is not really like it's somewhere adjacent, but it's not exactly the same. It feels like a pocket is an allowance, right? It's like this is a spot where you can go and still find the one or be on time and do all these things, right? But like what you're talking about is a lot. It's just less boundaried than that, seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely more that like I think like depending on how different people use any of these words, they can mean the same thing.
Sure.
But I definitely do see it as this more like this less straight walls or less of a grid.
Yeah.
Or any of these things, even in this sort of feel thing where you have this like point on a grid that has X amount of allowed variability or variability that you can use. I do feel like the way I think about it has a lot of softer edges than maybe those like that hard like grid oriented thing. Which, to be fair, you can't only do that. You can't just like be like, well, it's all like you can't like get hired for a cover band and then be like, well, my drumming is as free floating as a leaf
Right.
falling from the oak tree. Like you can't only be grounded to that.
Sure.
But I think like in the times where it is allowed to come out, which has been more and more as I've been like increasingly focused on my own musical projects as work, as opposed to just hired like standards gigs and things like that, which I still love. But it's like I have an allowance to just like feel it the way you want to feel it. That's the point, because it's yours.
Yeah. With your solo projects, I haven't had a chance to like listen yet. But are you composing with other instruments as well, or what is it like?
Yeah, there's some composed ideas that are written down. Usually on there was nothing written that was longer than 8 bars at a time. And it was basically like I knew I was going to use a certain amount of like hooks or ideas or motifs or things. And then I just did a day in the studio, and it's basically layered improv. Like starting with drums and piano. Okay. Then synth, and then other stuff that kind of comes into some songs and not others. But yeah, it was very like there were ideas composed and the structures were very improvised.
Okay. I saw that you're featured on a Nelson's drum shop.
Oh yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
They're great.
Nice. Yeah, I went to Nashville last spring, but I didn't get a chance to go there. I ended up going to Forks Drum Closet just on recommendation. But I
also a beautiful drum store.
Yeah. I kind of wish I had made it to Nelson's. What I understand, they have a lot of vintage stuff there.
Yeah. It's like this very curated, like vintage and boutique thing. It was the first drum store I ever went to.
Is it?
It was on my first ever tour.
Oh wow! Where'd you grow up?
In Winston-Salem.
Okay.
So yeah, not far from where we are now. But yeah, like my first time getting to a city that had a drum store.
Yeah.
A chance to go.
Right.
Was at the end of our like first tour.
Okay.
And it was like the last day. We had totally made no money, probably lost money.
Yeah.
I think we were like 16 at the time. So it would have been like we'd lost some money on that we were gonna have to like pay back our parents' credit cards for.
Yeah.
But I had like put aside like I forget how much money. That's good. I put aside like one cymbal's worth of money.
Okay.
That I was like, no matter what happens on the tour, I'm not spending this until I get to the drum store. So I ended up buying. I still have that cymbal.
What'd you find?
It's the Jazz Ride that I have, the 22.
Istanbul.
Yeah.
That's a really cool cymbal company, it seems like.
Yeah, I did not mean to be like a full convert and then I just like they started being the most reliable ones.
And they're innovative.
For my taste. Yeah, like I think they're that mix of like the like it's so corny to be like the old K sound and stuff like that. Like everybody says that, but they have this old tradition. They have like 1 foot there and then 1 foot in like coming up with such cool stuff.
Yeah.
So they just won me over. I totally had no intention of being like it matters to me to have brand loyalty.
Right.
Person. But
right.
Yeah. I've always loved the like darker and darker cymbals, like as dry and dark as you can get. And then they kind of like skyrocketed on that trajectory.
Yeah. I've just kind of found myself on the same path with dry and dark.
Yeah.
And I totally get the brand. I'm more prone to brand loyalty, probably just subconsciously than anything, you know. But fortunately, right now it's not too brand specific. It's still between Zildjian and Meinl, but that's just because I think when I went, I didn't have quite the money for the Istanbul that I wanted.
Right. No, all mine are used. Like.
Oh yeah, that's the way to go. Yeah.
That's why you go to Nelson's. They have all these great used everything.
Yeah.
But they're super sweet. It was like a super bucket list thing.
Nice.
When they like, do you want to come film a product video?
Oh wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, you guys know who I am.
So they just found you with your Instagram profile?
Yeah, I guess I'd been in a couple times. And then they saw my Instagram because I just like I knew some people mutually too, just people that had been on like, oh, whoa, I followed you on Instagram because we played a gig together, or things like that. So there were some mutual people through internet and gigging world. And yeah, I was like there to play a gig with my friend Grace for her group, and stopped in, and the owner Bryson happened to be there. I was like, hey, like, you're Emma, right? I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't know, like, if you have time, we'd really love it. Like, totally pitched it as like as if I was doing a favor. Like, we'd love it if you could do this. Like, and I was like trying to hide my like little kid, like, fangirling out, being like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, like, all my favorite drummers do these videos. But that was really cool because I'd also just started going by Emma too. So and it was just like, I wasn't used to like hearing it out in the world, and I was like, yes.
And then it's copywritten too on their website, or whatever.
So it's there.
So it's
that was I think that was one of the first announcements thing, because I don't think I actually told people.
Wow.
When I was changing my name, I think I just switched it, and it was right when that Nelson video came out. So I think they kind of introduced me as Emma.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool.
Is that a name that you had kind of in the back of your head for a long time, or how'd that come up?
No, it just popped up.
Okay.
It totally just, like, because I was like, oh, am I going to change my name? Because I came out before I changed my name. So I still went by my old name for a little bit. And then I remember I went on a trip to New York to drive, like, my friend who was moving back. So I was driving them back up to New York. And I remember just, like, on a whim, like, in, like, either right before we left or, like, in the car, was like, hey, no one's gonna know me here. I might just like see how it feels to introduce myself as Emma.
Yeah. For
the like 2 days that I'm in New York.
Sure.
So I did it, and then I like was driving home. I like dropped them off. Got back in my van. Was like I had like a 10-hour drive home, and was just like alone to ponder. And I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is it. I got it. I can do it.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that was just like another great decision. It was one of those things that's probably like brewing more subconsciously, like much more than I realized it was. And then it comes out in like a flash moment. Okay. Which, like, it seems like a lot of stuff does for me. This, like, I only knew I had been thinking about it for years in retrospect. And that's always very interesting. But yeah, that's how that went. And then like I think it was like 5 days later or something was when I wound up doing the Nelson thing. And I was like, yeah, it's Emma. And like, cool. It's like, yes, this is great.
Nice.
It's working.
Yeah. That's great. So you had mentioned like some of your favorite drummers do that, like do videos like that. Like, do you get out to see much live music at this point?
I try to, although luckily I've been playing out a lot. So there is always a part of me that's like, I did this every day this week already. Like, can I not go to a bar?
Of course.
But I still like to go to a lot. I've been to some bigger concerts recently, because for a long time I was only going to like very DIY, like bar shows, things like that. But I definitely like try to like plan in advance, be like, this is important for me to see this. But I had to stop. Like, when I was a kid, I would just go to every possible show all the time on a whim. And like, I'm not even old. I just don't have the energy to do it, having done it like the other 5 days of that week.
Sure.
But I still love it. I love it every time, like seeing live music. So it's just something I have to deliberately like put effort into doing the practical side of caring about it.
Right. Yeah. What's next for you artistically?
Let's see. Got a couple tours coming up, so it's kind of going to be go mode.
Okay.
Through winter, and then we're taking some winter time off, and then using all that like booking time to like kind of go crazy next year. Some more solo shows.
Where do you do the solo shows?
It's all brand new to me. I'm doing one at Nelson.
Okay.
which will be crazy
Uh-huh.
and terrifying. It's gonna be like the most terrifying show.
Why is that?
I was like, hey, just like, you want to go play solo drums in front of a crowd of drummers?
A bunch of drummers, yeah.
It's also going to be great. Like, it's going to be super fun. Like, that was like being stoked on the video opportunity, but like on steroids.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh my God, I'm going to play there.
Any around here in Asheville?
Yeah, I know. The one that's super solid now is I'm playing at the, I forget the actual date, but it's the Saturday of the Women to the Front weekend festival. So that will be the first Asheville solo show in a while. I've done a couple scattered in different places just with offers and things, but that's going to start becoming like more of an integrated part of the traveling and touring and playing.
Nice. What's the structure of that? Like when you do a solo show, like what's the time frame? Like,
usually like a 30 to 45 minute thing.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to like stretch out an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Basically drum solos.
Yeah.
Can get kind of difficult. But yeah, it's just.
Do you use synth or anything else during
this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's all live. It's all done pretty live.
Okay.
Of these kind of like live looping and ambient things and just like kind of like sound exploration. Very rarely would it go into like I'm playing along to this synth groove type thing. So it's like very textural. So it's mostly there for like textural like inspiration.
Okay.
And the drums are definitely like the main, like that's the performance instrument. And then there's like a little like synth and some guitar pedals and different things and percussion.
So you're doing the guitar pedals and stuff that are mic'd to acoustic drums? Or?
No, they're mic'd to the synth.
Okay.
So the synth is just running through a pedal chain.
Gotcha.
So it'll probably be very different every time I do it too.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see kind of like how the like trial by fire live shows with that goes. Just because with like, I mean, any other genre or band or whatever that I do live, like that's such a big part of it. It's like the amount a song or a style or a group is going to change, like from rehearsing it before you ever play it live and then like play it live 10 times and it's not going to feel the same.
Yeah.
It's going to be completely different. Sometimes in like really like ways an audience could pick out, sometimes not. But even if it's only in your head, like your headspace around it will change.
So this might not be a fair question since it's all new for you in doing this, but I was just kind of thinking about the ways in which you've practiced or would just kind of, lose track of time while you were playing and find that meditative state. Do you find that much when you're performing?
Yeah. It's pretty similar. I guess the only difference really with performing is I don't quite get it if I'm like performing with like brand new people or things like that, or just like this like pickup gig and we didn't rehearse, and then you do have to kind of like pull out this like academic, like I learned the skills to read a chart or play jazz standards with new people. But anything that kind of has a certain level of like musical comfortability already, especially like my own projects like Watches is like super meditative, and the only difference with stuff like that is that it will just be cut short because the set will end. Because otherwise I would just like, okay, blah blah blah. But I know Watches sets, like we've done the math and the set is like 37 minutes and it usually feels like maybe like 5 or 6. I think that's usually the case with playing live as well as practicing. Like
been talking to a lot of drummers lately, and one of the drummers I spoke with more recently too talked a lot about like seeking out like that level, like just only being interested in that, or not only, but really seeking that out in drummers and trying to do it for themselves. But they're in the doom metal space, so it's a lot of movement of energy, but also kind of a structure that's kind of familiar, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fascinating to me. So it was like it was right after that conversation with that drummer that I saw your band that I finally totally got what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to the point, like I texted them to let them know.
Cool.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is what you mean. You need to come check this out. And they were excited about it. So, but yeah, so all that to say, you get that sense when you're at a Watches show, the one that I've been to, where it is like in the moment and, it's all moving and it's not, I don't know. It's a lot of fun to witness.
Yeah. I'm glad it shows up. That's
Yeah.
definitely like such a goal for both of us. Definitely.
Nice. And so you said you had known Tristan for like 7 years. So this was like before college and all that.
Yeah. We both are from Winston-Salem.
Mm-hmm.
So we met at the like city skate park.
Uh-huh.
And I think like that day.
Okay.
We're just like, you want to start a band?
Nice.
What kind of band should we start?
Do you still skate?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm way worse than Tristan. That's the whole deal. Tristan's the significantly better skateboarder.
Okay.
Yeah, we skated like last week.
Okay, nice. Anything else you do outside of drumming?
I feel like I do probably a lot.
Yeah.
I definitely do the like I will hobby jump and get obsessed.
Yeah.
But some of the ones that are the sticking now, I climb.
Okay.
I've been running most days.
Mm-hmm.
I paint. Lots of like printmaking stuff.
Okay.
And I just like play other instruments.
Yeah.
And I do just like a lot of little random things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll totally like hyper obsess over any new hobby.
Uh-huh.
Like if it's exciting, I will go learn everything.
Uh-huh. A lot of research.
Yeah, I'm definitely a researcher.
Yeah. Absolutely. I identify for sure. That's one of my hobbies is collecting hobbies. So
yeah,
it's but it's fun. It's all interesting. So it's good to find out all about that stuff. But drumming's kind of held on for the most part for me. Definitely has for you.
Definitely.
Cool. I really appreciate your time and you coming over here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited to do this.
Yeah.
I like drum nerd things.
Yeah, cool. What'd you think? I thought it was incredible. I got a lot out of it. This was the first time that I've posted a guest drumming at the intro. Let me know what you think. I know I kind of put my guests on the spot. It's my kit set up for me. I'm kind of tall. I like my stuff a little bit spread out. But she didn't make it seem like it was an issue at all. I think the only reason I would not do it again is just being, seeing other people play that kit better than me. But again, this is about shrinking the ego, finding the self. So I'm going to be humble. But it was cool to see her play live in the house. So Watches, her band, is on a tour right now. You can see them in Knoxville at the Pilot Light on August 29th. Today will be August 25th when this is released of 2023. So keep that in mind as I list these dates. The 31st, she'll be at Nelson's Drum Shop in Nashville, Tennessee. She had mentioned this in the episode, but that I know that's a big deal because there's a lot of folks that come through there and do demos there or shows, and so to be asked to do that it's an honor, and she deserves it. And as she was saying, you're essentially playing drums in front of a bunch of drummers, so it's a different feel there. No doubt it'll be good though. September 1st, she'll be going through Louisville, Kentucky. On the 2nd, Cincinnati. On the 6th, Winston-Salem. And then back here, I believe, for the Women to the Front Festival in Asheville on the 16th of September. So I'm definitely going to try to make that festival. A lot of good musicians that I've seen on the lineup. And I'm going to bring my girls. And, so you might see me out there. So say hi. But otherwise, thanks for sticking around. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave me comments. If you would rate and review, that would be a huge help. Help me keep this going. And otherwise, I'll see you for the next one. Take care.